I want to tell you something that most women have never said out loud to a man, not because it is not true, but because finding the words for it requires a level of honesty about our own inner experience that most of us have never been asked to have. It is about touch. Not the obvious kind, not the kind that gets talked about in every article and every video that promises to tell you what women want. The other kind, the kind that happens in a moment so quiet and so specific that most men walk past it every day without understanding what they just had the opportunity to create, and the women who receive it, the ones who are on the other side of that moment, carry it with them for years, sometimes for the rest of their lives. I know this because I have been that woman. I know exactly what it feels like when a man touches you in a way that reaches something underneath the surface, not because the touch was practiced or strategic or technically correct, because behind it was something she could feel before her mind had processed a single conscious thought about it. Something that said, without words, I see you, not your appearance, not the version of yourself you presented to the room when you walked in. You. The specific, particular, unrepeatable you that most people never slow down enough to notice. That is what I am going to talk about today. Not zones and locations and techniques. The thing underneath all of that. The quality that determines whether a touch lands on the surface of a woman's experience or goes somewhere deeper, somewhere she will return to in quiet moments she did not plan, somewhere that makes her think of you not because you did something impressive, but because you did something rare. You were actually there. But before I get to that, I need to dismantle something, because there is a version of this conversation that gets had constantly in content like this, and it is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of how women actually experience touch. The version that says if you touch her here in this specific way with this specific pressure for this specific duration, a predictable response will follow, as if the female nervous system is a combination lock and the right sequence of physical inputs will reliably open it. I understand why that version is appealing. It is concrete. It is learnable. It gives the man receiving the advice something specific to do, but it is wrong, and I can prove it from the inside. I have been touched in technically correct ways that left me feeling nothing, less than nothing. I have been touched in technically imperfect ways that reached something in me so specific and so real that I thought about it for days afterward. The difference was never the location. The difference was never the pressure or the timing or the precise anatomical zone. The difference was what was behind the touch, the quality of attention that preceded it. Whether the man touching me was actually present in that moment or whether he was somewhere else, monitoring, performing, executing a technique he had learned with the goal of producing a specific outcome. And I felt the difference the way you feel the difference between a room where someone is genuinely glad you are there and a room where someone is managing the impression they are making on you. Both rooms can look identical from the outside. They feel completely different from the inside. So, here's what I want to give you today. Not a map of zones, not a sequence of locations, the understanding of what has to be true about you in the moment before any touch in any location with any pressure or timing becomes the kind of touch a woman carries with her for the rest of her life. The first thing is presence. And I want to be specific about what I mean by presence because it is one of those words that gets used so often it has lost its precision. Presence does not mean paying attention. It does not mean looking at her and nodding and appearing engaged. Presence means that the part of you that is usually somewhere else, monitoring how you are landing, assessing whether the interaction is going well, preparing your next contribution, managing the impression you are making, that part is quiet. Not disciplined into quietness. Actually quiet because you are genuinely here. In this moment, with this person. And nothing outside of this moment is pulling at your attention because this moment is enough. When a man is genuinely present, a woman feels it before he has said a word or made any physical contact. She feels it in the quality of his stillness, in the unhurried way his attention arrives and stays, in the absence of that low-level restlessness that characterizes the attention of a man who is in the interaction but not fully of it. And when that quality of genuine presence precedes a touch, the touch arrives differently than any technically correct touch delivered by a man whose attention is divided. It arrives with the full weight of being seen by someone who is completely there. And that weight, that specific gravity of undivided human attention, is what makes a touch go somewhere deeper than the surface. The second thing is intention without agenda. And this distinction is subtle, but it is everything. Most touch that men give women has an agenda underneath it. Not necessarily a bad agenda, not necessarily a manipulative one, simply a direction it is trying to go, a response it is hoping to produce, a destination it has in mind before it has even arrived. And women feel that directionality the way you feel a current in still water. The surface looks calm, something underneath is pulling in a specific direction. And that pulling, that ambient pressure of touch that wants something from you, creates in the woman receiving it a low level alertness that prevents her from fully receiving the touch. She is not just receiving, she is also assessing, navigating, managing what this touch means and where it is trying to take her. Intention without agenda is completely different. It is a touch that wants nothing except to make contact. That is not going anywhere. That has no destination in mind. A hand rested on the back of her hand at a moment when she has said something that moved her, and the touch says simply, "I heard that. I am here." Nothing is required of you in response to this. That touch, that specific quality of contact that asks nothing and offers everything, lands in a completely different place in a woman's experience than any touch that is trying to produce a result. It lands as a gift, and gifts, genuine ones that come with no invoice attached, are among the rarest things one person can give another. The third thing is timing that comes from listening rather than planning. Most men think about when to touch as a strategic question. When has enough rapport been built? When will it be received well? When is the moment calibrated correctly for the touch to land as intended? And this thinking, this strategic consideration of timing, produces touches that arrive at planned moments rather than true ones. And a touch that arrives at a planned moment feels planned. It feels like a move. Even when the woman receiving it cannot articulate exactly why it feels that way, she feels it. Something about the touch is slightly too precise, slightly too well-timed, slightly more like a decision that was made before the moment arrived than a response that arose from the moment itself. Timing that comes from listening is different. It arises from being so present in the conversation that the moment for touch makes itself known rather than being calculated. She says something vulnerable and a hand arrives at her arm before you have consciously decided to move it because you were so fully in the conversation that your body responded before your mind directed it. She laughs and your hand touches hers briefly and then leaves because the moment was complete and you felt its completion rather than holding the contact past it. This kind of touch is not planned, it is received. It comes from paying such close attention to the actual living moment in front of you that the moment itself tells you what it needs. And here's the thing I want you to understand about all three of these qualities: presence, intention without agenda, and timing from listening. They are not techniques. They are not things you can layer onto an interaction from the outside. They are the natural expression of a man who is genuinely invested in the person in front of him rather than in the outcome of the interaction. A man who finds her actually interesting. A man whose curiosity about who she is runs deeper than his desire to produce a specific response in her. A man who is, in the truest sense of the word, there. That man does not need to know which zone to touch, because when he touches anywhere, the touch carries everything I have just described, and a touch that carries genuine presence, intention without agenda, and timing born from listening does not land on the surface of a woman's experience. It lands somewhere she will return to, somewhere she will describe to her closest friend, not with the words "he touched my arm" or "he held my hand," but with words that try to capture something larger and more significant than any anatomical description can reach. He made me feel seen. He made me feel like the only person in the room. He made me feel, for a moment, completely safe. Those words, that feeling. That is what you are creating when the touch is right. Not a physical sensation, an experience of being fully received by another human being. And that experience, that rare and extraordinary gift of genuine human presence expressed through the simplest possible physical contact, is what she will carry with her long after everything else about the evening has faded. It is never the touch she remembers. It is what the touch told her about the man giving it. And now I want to get specific, because everything I have described so far is true, and it is the foundation of everything. But I also know that foundation without form leaves a man standing in a moment he wants to get right with nothing concrete to hold. So let me give you the form, not as a sequence of zones to execute, but as a description of what those three qualities actually look like when they arrive in a real moment with a real woman. The touch that women remember most is almost never dramatic. It is almost never the touch that was building towards something or announcing something or trying to create something. It is the touch that arrived in a quiet moment and said nothing except, "I am here and so are you," and this moment between us is real. A hand that rests briefly on the back of hers when she says something she did not expect to say. A touch at the small of her back at the exact moment she is navigating something slightly uncertain, and the touch says without words, "I have you." A single moment of contact at her forearm that arrives not as a prelude to anything, but as a complete sentence in itself. These touches are small. They are brief. They do not linger past their own completion. And they are, without exception, the ones she describes years later when someone asks her about a man who made her feel something real. The reason they last is not their location. It is their completeness. Each one arrived, said exactly what it needed to say, and left without asking for anything in return. And that completeness, that quality of a touch that is whole in itself rather than a step toward something else, is what makes it lodge somewhere permanent in her memory. She does not replay it wondering what it meant. She knows what it meant. It meant exactly what it said, and what it said was true. So here's what you actually do. You slow down enough to feel the moment before you respond to it. You let her words arrive fully before your body decides what to do with them. You stay in the conversation so completely that when a moment of contact becomes true, you will feel it rather than plan it. And when it arrives, you trust it. You do not second guess it. You do not calculate whether it is too soon or too much or too revealing of how present you actually are. You simply respond to what the moment is asking for, and then you let it be complete. You are not trying to touch her in the right place. You are trying to be the right kind of man in the moment. And the right kind of man in the moment is the one who is fully there, wanting nothing except to be exactly where he is, with exactly who is in front of him. That man's touch lands somewhere no zone map can find. It lands in the place where she keeps the things that stay with her. And once you have touched her there, in that place that has nothing to do with anatomy and everything to do with presence, she will remember you. Not because you did something impressive, because you were somewhere real. And real is the rarest place a person can take another person. It is the only place that lasts. It is never too late to become that man. You already are him when you are most fully yourself. Start there, stay there, and let everything else follow.